There's no more underscore? All is one word. Okay. I would have used an underscore. Okay. Okay, welcome everyone to the meeting of the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board. Today we are having a hybrid format meeting, which means that we do have some individuals online, which you'll be able to see because we're broadcasting on YouTube, as well as the video will be posted on YouTube automatically as a result. With that, we do have individuals here today, and oh, I forgot to do the recognition territories. My apologies. We're coming to you live today from the territories of the Hupetchisut and Dishot First Nations. And because we're a hybrid meeting, we're also coming to you from a whole host of Nuu-chah-nulth and potentially Coast Salish First Nations, depending on where some of us are coming to you from. And on that, because it's a hybrid meeting, we need to introduce the folks who are here today in person. So just starting with Bob Schmidt is the alternate representative for Banfield, because Bob Beckett is currently in Europe on a humanitarian mission. We also have live in the boardroom today, he does exist, Director Tom Steer, or myself. We have Director Susan Roth from Beaver Creek, as well as our Vice Chair Deb Haggard and President Penny Cote of the AVICC. Also Representative for Sprout Lake. In terms of the staff in today, we have our CAO, Daniel Sayan. We have our corporate officer, Wendy Thompson. We have our planning manager, not director, Mike Kirk, and our CFO, Terry Pham. With that, I think that means that we can kick off the meeting. We'd like to start first with observing the passing of a former chair of the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District and a member of the City of Port Alberni's Council, Donna Brett. So we'll have a minute of silence starting now. Thank you. All right, so into the agenda itself, we do have one item to add to the in-camera agenda. And so it's another reason that we have to state to go in camera, and it'll be under section 91J and 21(1)(a)(2) of FOIPA, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. We'll go into more detail when I read that out, but that is the only thing to add to the agenda, because I think the in-camera agenda is kind of a subordinate agenda to the main one. Are there any other items or materials to add to the agenda? Seeing none, if we could have a motion to adopt the agenda. Thank you, Director Cote, seconded by Director Roth. Thank you. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. All right, does anyone have any declarations? So these are conflicts of interest, apparent conflicts of interest, or any gifts exceeding $250 in value. I believe that is 5 dozen eggs nowadays. Already. Okay, that brings us, the next item are the adoption of the minutes. First up is the Board of Directors meeting dated January 25th, 2023. Director Cote?
Move adoption.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Roth. Thank you. Any comments, errors, or omissions? Anything that needs to be updated? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item 5, which is petitions, derogations, and presentations. We have a pair of presentations for you today. Normally, we keep the presentations themselves to a 10-minute time limit. So if you see me hold up to 2 fingers or 1 finger, that's how many minutes you have left, and I may interrupt you after that, unless it seems like you're pretty close to the end, because we do normally practice to have a motion to continue if it seems like you're not very close to the end. With that in mind, though, I'd like to welcome Ms. Joanne Sales regarding the spread of invasive Scotch broom across Vancouver Island, representing the Broom Busters Invasive Plant Society. Thank you and welcome. When you get it started, make sure you stand at the podium and use the microphone.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairperson Jack and directors. I really appreciate that you've slipped us in for today so quickly. I am Joanne Sales. I'm the Executive Director of Broom Busters Invasive Plant Society. And I'm here speaking today representing the local Broom Busters who are right here. Raise your hand to Wendy. So these are the 2 women who have been organizing all the cuts that have been going on around Port Alberni and in this area. And then there's another woman who's been working with Sprout Lake. So right here. Okay, I'm just not. Okay, so you hit over here and it works. Okay, all right, here we go. So Pelican Beach will be presenting a resolution at ABICC, and it's all about Scotch broom, and they are actually finalizing the wording of it today. But here is why that resolution is important and why we're asking for ACRD support. Scotch broom has been getting off scot-free basically for 170 years on Vancouver Island, and it's time for a change before this happens. These are photos that Vancouver Island residents took of New Zealand when they went there on vacation. Scotch broom prevents forest regrowth. Now, New Zealand didn't know that when they cut down the forest and the broom and forest were moving in. We do know it, and our hope is that, like New Zealand is now enforcing strict bylaws, and we're hoping that we can make a change before we get to this situation. Broom grows huge quickly. Okay, so it's a woody weed. It's not a tree, and so it grows much faster than the forest will grow or the native plants. And so it quickly smothers and crowds out native species. It's also a serious fire danger, according to Terry Peters, who's a fire chief at Powell River. Just, well, first of all, look at the photo on the right-hand side, and you'll see a fire truck and a person at the side of the huge fire. Scotch broom is a volatile flash fuel, and it will increase a wildfire's fuel load, escalate the fire's intensity, compromise fire situations, and make fires more difficult to fight, also more dangerous to fight. And the reason for this is that there are naturally occurring dry branches and it has high oil content. So all of the broom that you see in these photos here, that is all live broom. That had not been cut yet. That's what broom looks like in a dry summer. So if there's a fire danger, broom in the summer is alive but dry. We also have a problem with Scotch broom on transmission lines. Okay, BC Hydro does not control the spread of broom under transmission lines because there is no pressure from governing entities, is what we were told. So the problem with allowing it to be there is that fire could easily spread across the island. It also carries seeds to previously broom-free areas, and it blocks escape routes, which is very important for many communities. So here's a close-up. Here I am walking under the broom under power lines. I mean, it looks like it was just short little stuff, but this is what it looks like in a lot of places. So this was last spring after it was a very wet spring, but you can imagine what it would look like if it was a dry summer. So we have lost forest and lost timber sales. Scotch broom moves from transmission lines into forests. And on these photos, you can see the yellow moving into the replanted forest. And it will diminish the regrowth of the forest there. $47 million were lost in timber sales in Oregon in 2014, and that was 9 years ago. $142.7 million lost forecast in Washington in 2017. I don't have BC figures, but I'm sure that they're not good either. Broom negatively impacts agriculture and food security. Broom is toxic to grazing animals and wildlife, while it's displacing the foods that they need to eat. Broom releases toxins and changes soil chemistry, making the soil less habitable, not as good for the native plants. It's the scourge of pasture land. And when broom takes over farms, it's hard to reclaim. These are two photos of brooms farms that have been taken over by broom. The reason why it's such a problem is a single plant produces 18,000 seeds, and they're viable in the soil for 30 plus years. So you can imagine every time you're trying to turn the soil, when the seeds see the sun, they will sprout. There's a lot of emphasis on biodiversity, which is wonderful. But what isn't usually recognized is that Scotch broom is considered to be the worst offender of biodiversity. A study was done for the Invasive Species Council of BC in 2021. And if you look at that chart, at the very top, this is a list of all of the invasive plants and animals that cause harm to native species. And Scotch broom is way at the top and is greater than all of the other invasives. Scotch broom is the invasive species causing the greatest harm to species at risk in BC. So we're all familiar with broom on the highways. The one on the top left just shows how that was right on the side of the road, a major highway, how flammable that broom is during the summer. Bottom right is where a hydro line is crossing Highway 19. And the one at the top, that is a field that was deforested, and the broom from the highway moved in and took over. And it was 10 to 15 years and not a single tree regrew. When land is cleared of forest and neglected, Scotch broom quickly becomes established. This was a place close to my home, so I was able to keep track of it on our burning highway. Spring 2020, the forest was removed. It was totally bare soil. 2 growing seasons later, the broom had totally taken over, and it was 2 feet tall. I took pictures the other day, and some of it is 6 feet tall now. Broom is a significant threat as a fire hazard for urban interface fires in our region. We have private property problems. Land is too often deforested, cleared for development or for farming, instead, but then the land is left neglected. The left side that's 2 years of growth and has been taken over. But the top right is, as long as I can remember, that was a field of broom, and no trees have grown there. At the bottom is a newly cleared field with broom right in the center. And with no bylaws in regional districts, this will just become one of many broom fields. Why is nothing being done about Scotch broom? And why is it only classified as a weed to control when it does so much harm? Well, Scotch broom is mostly on Vancouver Island, so it's up to local governments on Vancouver Island to take action. You can see by the map that the broom, it came to Stewart in 1850 and has spread from there up the island, and now it's spreading onto the mainland. We could stop it now, but soon it will be too late. When it comes to invasive plants, every year lost is land lost. So people all over BC care about the spread of Scotch broom. On the top left, we have one of our MLAs is cutting broom at a hatchery. On the far right top, we now have a Coquitlam on the mainland that is doing broom busting. The bottom, always there's broom on the road. And now that these photos the rest of the photos are in our area. In 2022, 667 Broom Buster volunteers cut broom over 6,000 hours across Vancouver Island and the mainland. The volunteers in Alberni Valley cut broom for 374 hours. And there are now Broom Busters from Sooke to Alert Bay, from ACRD to Coquitlam. Over 17 local governments participate. And each one is organized by a local representative. So these are cuts that have been done behind Staples, behind the Athletic Club, and the Dry Creek Walkway, when it was still covered with broom, is now cleared. Faber Road used to be lined with broom. Now it is mostly clear. And in 2022, there was a special event by the Sproat Lake community. The Faber Road Fire Hall has been worked on. We expect all of these people will be coming out again this spring. Broom Busters and the Alberni Valley Nature Club cleared the Somas Estuary. That was a several-day project. The broom seeds are still there, but if the grass becomes rich and the ground cover takes over again, then the seeds don't sprout. Roger Creek, I just drove by it now, it's totally clear. Hospital Hill, this has been quite a project. So Broom Busters applied for a grant to pay for chip-in 2023. In 2022, Broom Busters paid $438 to a local tree service to chip ACRD piles. In addition, over 20 truckloads were taken to the transfer station by volunteers. For safety, we prefer to have piles chipped by a professional tree service. And by the way, we don't ask for a grant every year. We kind of take turns among the municipalities and regional districts. So we're asking ACRD to support the resolution about Scotch broom at ABICC. So we'll be at it again this spring. Invite everyone to join. And these are all the children. These are the reason why we're doing it is for the future. We can't leave this mess to our children. So for the sake of farms, forests, and the future, we cut broom and bloom. Thank you.
Great. I'm wondering if we could have the presentation turned off. If you wanted to.
Yeah, you might be able to.
Yeah, I think there's a thing right in the top middle. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we'll go straight to comments. Thank you for your presentation. Vida, please go ahead, or Director Siga, please go ahead.
I have a few questions. One is that in these broom areas that are usually in undeveloped lands that have been cleared, where I've seen it, there are large numbers of local bee populations. So in that respect, since bees are an endangered entity, I'm wondering if any research has been done on what would a cover crop post clearing of land possibly be that could support similar bee populations and somehow make the soil uninhabitable to broom. Has any research been done on that?
Well, one thing I do know is that they have done research on the bees and the bees going to Scotch broom. And bees are very selective about the kinds of plants that they can come to. For example, I have a blueberry farm, and there's only certain kinds of bees that can actually pollinate the blueberries. So the problem is that the bees that are going to the broom are not the same ones that will be pollinating our native plants. So there's a conflict of interest there. We want the bees to be taken care of, but we want to have native flowers. I don't know of what good cover crop would be taking the place of broom, but that's something that really should be researched. So appreciate that question. I'll ask somebody who knows.
Thank you. Are there any others? Dr. Coetzee, please go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you very much for coming, and I really appreciate your efforts for all over the island, really. And I'm sure that you're connected. I've heard quite a few presentations in the past from Qualicum area, especially I think you started the broom busting in that area, and local Sproat Lake residents have picked up on that and very thankful for that. They've done an excellent job, and I want to continue to support them going forward. So just say thank you and look forward to this resolution coming forward at AVICC. I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Steer?
Right, thank you very much. Yes, through the chair. I have a question in terms of on the West Coast where we're seeing, especially in the multi-jurisdictional areas out in and specifically in our forested areas, where over the number of years there's been literally an explosion of broom, and many of these areas are quite inaccessible. There's within the ACRD, sort of behind our landfill area and stuff, which is accessible. I'm wondering, is there any way in terms of a coordinated response through broom busters out onto the West Coast, where we would be able to access the knowledge and skills of your group to be able to look at ways of mitigating some of those areas in the more remote parts of our area? We have a great volunteer base that we can tap into, and I'm just wondering if that's realistic and if the
Yes.
information might be available.
Yeah, so the way Broom Busters spreads is that all it takes is for volunteers to say, hey, we want to do this. And then you need to have someone who would be the coordinator. So we're learning how to do this at a distance, right? So if there's somebody who would be in charge of that, then, you know, some of us are more than happy to come out and you know, even bring loppers and, you know, bring our expertise and, you know, and look at the kind of broom it is, because you treat broom in a different way. So we would be happy to come and, you know, give any advice that we can give you. And then, you know, the local representative, the area organizer would be working directly with the town, the city, to get the broom removed safely so that it isn't a fire hazard after it's removed. Yeah.
And so you're looking at having a champion in the community to take on that role.
That's all that's necessary, and then volunteers to support them, of course. But the main thing is, since you have a good volunteer base, just somebody who would take charge of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. And yeah, I think AVICC is coming quick, so
Okay, thank you very much.
have a good one. Okay, so that brings us to the next agenda item, which is 5B. And I'd like to welcome Ms. Tawny Lem, the Executive Director of the West Coast Aquatic Organization, providing an update on its activities in general. Thank you and welcome.
All right, why don't Mark? We good? Oh, not quite. Right. Good afternoon to our chair, the directors, to those online. My name is Tawny Lem with West Coast Aquatic, and here. Great, thank you. And it's our pleasure to be able to give a bit of an update, especially since we've got a number of new directors, many of which we've not met. So appreciate the opportunity. So by way of quick background, West Coast Aquatic has been around since about 2001, back in the days before the Monmouth Treaty, back in the days when all New Chalmers were negotiating a treaty together. The idea of an interim measure to treaty, so taking some immediate action, recognizing that treaty would take some time. The idea of having regional co-management, so regional being WCVI or West Coast of Vancouver wide, and co-management meaning communities managing in concert with the other levels of government. And West Coast Aquatic at the time, known as the Regional Aquatic Management Board, was the first such body formed in Canada under the Oceans Act. So a lot of really tough negotiations and hard efforts were made in those early days, and some real innovation for Canada around managing the oceans. And the terms of reference that formed the Regional Aquatic Management Board was signed by New Chalmers First Nations, the federal and provincial government, and the regional business. So when we talk about West Coast Aquatic, we often talk about two entities. The first is that governance board, again, the Regional Aquatic Management Board, as it was then known, and that is a voluntary body. The idea of bringing West Coast of Vancouver Island-wide ocean management issues, typically at a policy level, so less about what's happening right locally in an individual watershed, but thinking about those bigger policy issues that would affect the West Coast. And it was about bringing together New Chalmers with the other levels of government, as well uniquely as commercial and sport fishers, fishing processors, labor groups, environmental bodies, aquaculture, forestry, marine transportation, the idea of bringing all of those groups together in one place to make consensus recommendations and decisions in the marine space. So that's the governance board, again, voluntary. And in order to facilitate the work of that board, a legal entity was needed. And that's when the West Coast Aquatic Management Association, which Mark and I represent, was formed. And I think when we talk about the governance board, I want to acknowledge and thank the regional district's participation on that board all of these years. Tony Bennett was the director for many years and the co-chair. And now, thankfully, we've got Director Steer and I understand Director Siga, who have both been nominated to sit on that body. Now, I think what's interesting about the governance board is that the conditions in 2001, when we think about where New Chalmers goes out with treaty, where we think about where First Nations are at legally, the conditions today are very different. So we're going through this bit of a conversation around a refresh on the governance body, taking lead from New Chalmers about where are those issues where all communities and governments need to be working together. So we're taking some direction for New Chalmers, and we'll have a bit of a refresh on that board in the coming years. The West Coast Aquatic Management Association, on the other hand, again, is that legal entity. We're a registered society, and we serve as the technical secretariat to help do the work of the governance board when that is directed. And we also design and facilitate processes in natural resource management where there's diverse groups looking to achieve a common end, perhaps often with very complex issues and needing some help about how to work together. So our approach on that, what we do, we design and facilitate collaborative processes, but we've applied some very specific principles to that work. One is that we serve as a neutral party. We're not an environmental organization per se. We're not an Indigenous organization. We serve as a neutral party to bring all of these groups together. We firmly believe that there needs to be this bringing together or integration of all of the different knowledge types that exist: Indigenous, scientific, academic, local, bringing those things together and looking in a systems base. So as New Chalmers say, Hishokish Salak, everything is one, looking at things from an ecosystem-based approach. And all of this boiling up to sort of our why we do this. And this is the belief that people should see their values reflected in the decisions that affect them. So keeping management of natural resources as local as possible. So very quickly, a work at a glance. Here in the regional district, we facilitate 2 salmon roundtables, Area 23, Barkley, and Area 24, Claypot. And a very significant initiative called the West Coast Vancouver Island Chinook Rebuilding. I'll have Mark talk about that just in a moment. Beyond the ACRD, these roundtables also exist to the south with DT-DOT and to the north in areas 25 Nootka and 26 Cayucet, as well as even further south with Souk. And we recognized that we wanted this idea of collaboration in natural resource management, not just to be a pilot project as many saw it here on the West Coast. So innovating here at home, but needing support provincially as well around these principles of collaboration, which has led us to work further afield on the east coast of Vancouver Island, as well as a number of provincial processes, such as the Coastal Marine Strategy, which we'll also mention in a moment. So the salmon roundtables, really a core aspect of what West Coast Aquatic has been doing over a number of years, including here in the regional district. Each of the salmon roundtables is a bit different. They are their own entities, and form follows function. So the needs in those local areas dictate what happens at those tables. But for Area 23, here in Barclay, there's a significant commercial harvest. So there's a harvest fisheries table that makes consensus recommendations on local fishing plans. And there's also a stewardship body, the Barclay Salmon Working Group, which Director Cote sits on. In Clayoquot, given that there isn't that significant commercial harvest, the conversation turns more around some of the sport fishing, some of the Indigenous harvest, aquaculture, and a lot of the other restoration projects. So the salmon roundtables have some common principles around being ecosystem-based and bringing all of the relevant bodies together, but they are each very individual. So I'd like Mark to talk a bit about the Chinook rebuilding, since this is something that has been very significant for the roundtables and some of the communities here on the West Coast.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I will do my best to not take up too much time. This has been a collaboration between First Nations and DFO primarily. In 2019, as you can see here, the WCVI Chinook were listed in the critical red zone. So under the fish stock provisions that were added to the Fisheries Act in 2019, as well as the COSEWIC recommendation that West Coast Vancouver Island salmon be listed at risk, there's two separate processes that were required: a Chinook rebuilding strategy, as well as having a recovery potential assessment finished for these two. Now, we had been doing a lot of work, we as being West Coast Vancouver Island in general, developing strategic plans for freshwater systems on Vancouver Island, led by First Nations and supported by sectors and others for a long time. So part of why this area was identified in the first batch of rebuilding strategies was there was so much work that had been done on it already. We spent 2 years refreshing and redoing all the freshwater risk assessments. These are risk assessments that determine what's killing fish in a particular area, what's the risks to survival in that area. The following collaboration between some of the best ocean scientists in the world, First Nations and community members. So that looked at all of the ocean conditions at all life stages for salmon, spanning geography of natal streams all the way up to the Aleutian Islands and back again. It's a really big place. There's not a lot of people out there. So as you can imagine, we identified a lot of data gaps in that area. This was the process of developing a scientific backgrounder so that now as we go into the rebuilding phase, we're able to build a really robust rebuilding strategy that frankly has kind of been the envy of the rest of BC and hopefully serves as a bit of a model for other areas like the Fraser and the Skeena. However, because we had so much done in the past, frankly, I think we're probably going to have the most robust rebuilding plan in BC. Our approach now is to take all of that information and to work with First Nations all the way along the coast and say, what's important to you? What are your values? How do you want to do rebuilding within your territory? What matters to you from a socioeconomic point of view? What matters to you from a social point of view? And really being a resource to the nations who are inviting us to help them participate in their own rebuilding, to develop their own plans with their own values, and work with up the coast, nation to nation, developing these plans and then stitching them together in one sort of cohesive plan. Now, that whole plan will be much larger than what's required by the Fisheries Act or the Species at Risk Act. However, that's going to be distilled down to serve those two products, which will go through scientific reviews. What that will produce, though, is a cohesive strategy for rebuilding Chinook up and down the island that was first developed by First Nations and then supported by other governments and sectors as we go along. So it's I'd say, unique project in BC that we're proud to be invited to be a part of.
A final bit that we'll bring to your attention that we've been involved in with the province of BC is the BC Coastal Marine Strategy. I think often when we think about the marine space, certainly federal jurisdiction is clear around fisheries and transportation and Coast Guard, yet the province also has some significant jurisdiction around the marine and coastal area. And it is a significant policy gap that to date, BC does not have specific policy around the marine space, and the government has now committed to do that. So you'll hear about the BC Coastal Marine Strategy as one significant process of the province right now. A second is the wild salmon policy that they're working on, and a third is a sustainable watershed strategy. All of those fit together, and this also works in concert with things like the recent announcement you would have heard this morning around the offshore marine protected area. So all of these kind of fit together, but this is right in front of us right now. There's been some leadership sessions between Minister Cullen and First Nations that led into an intentions paper. This is kind of the general direction that BC says this is where we kind of need to go. That paper is open for engagement right now until March, and would really encourage the regional district to put some comments forward on that. Since that paper has now been released publicly, the next big milestone is on March 7th and 8th. And we've got the honor of helping to design and facilitate a large stakeholder forum. So regional districts, cities, the communities are being invited into this, industry partners and others to comment on how do we actually now start to implement the coastal strategy? What are some actions that you would want to suggest? What are some policies that you maybe see being needed? So that is coming up on the 7th and 8th. Our offer to you, since this does fit squarely into some of the work that the governance board did over 10 years ago, developing a similar strategy just for West Coast of Vancouver Island. If the regional district wants to participate through the government channels of the engagement and this forum, that's wonderful. And if the regional district wanted some help, we would sit down with members to solicit your feedback and ideas around where you would want to see a coastal marine strategy go for BC, and we would help document that with you to be submitted to the province. So with that, yes. All right. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you very much for your comments. See if there's any comments or questions. Oh, could we stop? Yeah, thank you. Director Siga, please go ahead.
What you've presented is wonderful, and I think it's great that you have acknowledged the local and situated knowledge of citizens and fishers. And your idea of collaboration, I think, is great. Congratulations. I look forward to working with you.
Thanks very much, Director.
Okay, next up we have Director Tucci. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson. So just two quick questions. Is it possible to get a copy of the existing terms of reference that was signed? And you had talked about looking at a potential refresh for I think it was the management board. Are there any preliminary thoughts on what that looks like? Just given that we're past the interim measures and we have the treaty implementation. So I'm just curious if there are some preliminary ideas of what that looks like.
Yeah, sure. I can feel that a little bit. Thank you. It was the governance board that we were referring to. Sorry, the management board's a whole separate thing. But with the governance board, we've been talking with New Hamilton, particularly through OASLEC and with the Council of Hutwit to kind of determine what that's going to look like. And there have been ideas kicked around right now. we're trying to stick sort of as on the ground as we can and determine what are those topics, what are those ideas that New Channel wants to collaborate on with sectors and with others. So we're just at that stage of that discovery now, and those conversations are ongoing, particularly at those two venues, but also collecting ideas through different places where we work with individual Nuu-chah-nulth nations and others to be able to bring those back to those two venues to have further discussions there. So I would say that's where the thoughts are developing at this moment, but really looking to take the lead from Nuu-chah-nulth, given UNDRIP and the current situation that we find ourselves in of trying to figure out how to implement some of these new ways of doing things. Yeah, we'll update you as we go for sure, but it's sort of in development at this point.
Thank you. Next up, I have Director Cote.
Thank you, through the chair. Great presentation. I've watched as West Coast Aquatic has produced tons of valuable information regarding our area and beyond for fisheries, and you've done an excellent job of bringing everybody together to the table. I think you're very well respected for the work that you've done, and hopefully this will continue on well into the future. I am aware of these different sessions that are coming forward through UBC or AVICC. There's been an invitation out to local governments and also asking for the information, anybody who has information. So I would like to recommend that the board actually works with West Coast Aquatic on this project. I think that it's important that we do, and we have two members that do sit on West Coast Aquatic. So yeah, really recommend that we work with you on this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Steer, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Penny. The resolution that was starting to craft, I think maybe we'll take what you said. So I did want to thank Johnny for coming and presenting, Mark for presenting, and maybe a little more formalized in terms of that coastal marine strategy. We know we now have a new ministry, a former chair of this of the ACRD who created that ministry, and now Minister Cullen involved. I think it would be important for us from this particular region have that form of input, and maybe through staff that connection can be made, and maybe look out a framework that might be the most productive for us to be able to input in there. So I would move the resolution as presented by Penny Cote, if that would be appropriate at this time.
Okay, second? All right. So in regards to maybe some of the specifics of the motion, we do have two directors who are working with the West Coast Aquatic. Do we have committee or staff support that can be assigned for that? Yeah.
We will certainly turn our attention to that and identify the appropriate person. I wouldn't be able to say right now, but we can certainly come back with them with a plan.
Well taken. I just felt like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. So I welcome this presentation. I think the work that's been done since 2001 has been great. To see a governance renewal in some way, shape, or form coming down the pipe is a very good idea, especially given the fact that First Nations will be further becoming what they should have been, and that'll look different than an Indian band. I think is important as well. And I do like that we're including local government in what's going on, because that local knowledge will matter, even especially when local government is quite involved in things that interface with fish and getting value out of fish from a local perspective, either through the food hub that's going on in Port Alberni, or even just finding ways to further food security and this sort of thing, right? Things that kind of intersect with agriculture in the same way that for First Nations communities, fisheries was our agriculture. We depended on fish the same way that European and other societies depended on wheat, right? So with that in mind, I think there's a lot of commonality there that can be spoken about, not just to the point of the life cycle of a fish, but what happens when they're caught, what happens when they're processed and so on and so forth. So I think we'll be interested on that side as well as what's going on when it comes to protecting stocks and looking at the policy that reviews how fish are managed for the most part across their entire life cycle. I think this is an overall approach that is probably going to be, like you said, the way that BC should be looking at doing this across multiple species, not just shark. So with that, I'd like to thank you and call if there are any other comments or questions regarding the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Thank you. Alrighty, so that brings us to the end of petitions and delegations. We don't have any correspondence for action. However, we do have correspondence for information. And I'm wondering if anybody, specifically Director Roth, wants to pull anything out. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I do. A letter from Tom Gowan. I'd like to just talk a little bit about it anyways. Tom Gowan is a certified general accountant and he's also a chartered professional accountant. He's quite concerned about spending and the Regional Aquatic Center. And I'm just going to read a few little bits out of the emails that went back and forth. Okay, Tom wrote, as a retired taxpayer in Beaver Creek, I do not support a regional aquatic center. Our economy and cost of living is a disaster. Our property tax bill during the COVID epidemic increased more than 13% last year, and it now seems that the regional government is getting out of hand. The Port Alberni pool is not a pressing need for this area, given the inflationary climate we're in right now. Will you confirm to me that you have a referendum? You will have a referendum if we are to be part of what will be very expensive commitment. Given the high cost of construction today, you can be sure that any budgeted expenditure will end up being way over budget and beyond the already fading ability of taxpayers to pay for it. Then I wrote back to Tom and I told him that when I was first elected onto the regional board, I asked whether there would be a proper referendum ballot for the proposed aquatic center and was told that long-term borrowing makes a referendum necessary. I imagine that the ACRD would need to borrow tens of millions of dollars to pay for the new aquatic center. However, I'm still not comfortable because the board may choose to use the alternate approval process rather than the type of referendum process that most of us understand. The province of BC states on their website that regional district matters where approval may be made by the alternate approval process include loan authorization bylaws. The provincial government also says the following, and this was copied and pasted into here. While the alternate approval process provides local government with greater flexibility and the potential for cost savings, it may not be appropriate for every situation, even where it's authorized by legislation. There are a number of factors local governments would need to consider when deciding whether to conduct an alternate approval process or proceed directly to assent voting, including history, scale, cost, public expectations, and timing of the matter of proposal. For example, if an issue is controversial, requires a significant financial contribution by taxpayers, or is significant in scale or impact on the community, local government may decide that it's more appropriate and cost-effective to proceed directly to assent voting. Then that went to Tom, and then I received back a letter from Tom, or an email from Tom that said, we're living in one of the most challenging times we have ever faced with record inflation, healthcare system on life support, and many in our society are just holding on by their fingernails just to keep a roof over their head. Now is not the time to even discuss a new aquatic center or even to consider another burden for an already burdened taxpayers to bear. So what I would like to do based on this is to make a motion. I would like to move for the ACRD to agree to employ the assent voting referendum process only when coming to decisions regarding a potential new aquatic center.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to the motion? Great, thank you, Director Boyko. If we can have comments. First, I'd like to ask the question in regards to what the processes are here. I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill in regards to whether or not something's going to assent voting or not. That seems like the default to me. But I'd like to ask either Wendy or Dan if that's been the approach so far.
Well, I think as indicated, typically with, if we were to get to a point where we were contemplating a large scale borrowing, typically a referendum would be something that is recommended. It would be under separate cover and would be attached to the decision at hand. I think the only thing that hasn't occurred yet is, of course, the discussion, and a large portion of that discussion revolves around potential governance and collaboration. So the question of who's involved is something that has not yet been resolved, as well as how they're involved. And although certainly staff would not say that a referendum is inappropriate, because it's not inappropriate, it's hard to give a recommendation outside of the context of knowing who's involved, how they're involved. And so it's a tough place to recommend at this point, because we just don't have enough information, I think would be fair to say.
I'll have Director Cote and then Director Roth.
Thank you. I agree with our administrator that we don't know what we're looking at yet to be able to make a decision on this. So I'm feeling like I don't have enough information to actually make a vote on this. We've done two different types of process. The arena that was built in the city of Port Alberni, we went to referendum a few times before it passed. The airport was a different situation. We were, the board of the day made a decision to do the alternate approval process because we were trying to access a grant. Unfortunately, we didn't get that grant at that day, but we did learn something that, you don't always win when you apply for grants. And that going forward, I would definitely be taking that into consideration if I was to vote on something for a new aquatic center. But I really don't think we're anywhere near the point that we need to go there. Who knows, Beaver Creek or Sprout Lake or whoever may not even be participants in the future. So we don't want to tie the city or the participants down to any one process at this point. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Roth, and then I assume Director Minions, because her camera's on, and then Director Haggard.
Okay, I'd just like to say there's a lot of mistrust in the community. And if we can decide on using a assent voting process rather than the alternate approval process, that might eliminate the mistrust. And then it would further engage people in the whole discussion.
Thank you for that. Next up is Director Minions and then Director Haggard.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak in support of the motion, though I understand the comments from staff that it is premature. I agree with that. I think that the intent of the motion is just to say that if we are to move forward, not that we are going to move forward with, proposing borrowing for the pool, but if we get to that point, that we're committed to doing a full proper referendum. And I can't imagine a circumstance where we wouldn't do that anyways. So I think this motion just puts that in writing and gives confidence to the people who it is a concern for. I think it will take a bit of the controversy out of the conversation in the public right now if we make this commitment. So though I think it's maybe not necessarily the right time for it, I definitely support the motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Director Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say, I think we're absolutely years away from doing a referendum for the pool. We're so far away from it. I am supportive of a referendum, but I think to put it in as a motion right now is just very premature. We can certainly make a statement that is our intention, but until we know exactly what we're doing and what we're dealing with, I just think we're years away from that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Director Coots, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to leave the comment. As other directors, I am fully comfortable with the motion, but I think the timing of it is not correct. I also would hate to fetter other elected officials. If this takes a long time, elections may happen and take place and changes of seats may happen. I would not want this board to fetter another board member's ability to move forward in the way that they see fit. So it's just a caution. I'm just thinking on those terms. True.
Thank you for that, Dr. Coots. And I would remind folks that we do have one seat vacant so far. I'm reminded because of some folks in the gallery today. So it's important to make sure that we have an entirely full set of individuals who will be fully empowered to make a decision in that way. Like I said, if the problem is a matter of trust, as long as it's understood that a decision now doesn't fetter a future decision from changing that, although I don't think that's going to happen. So it's one of those things where, yeah, we can build trust, but I think the trust will likely be built better by just communicating intent and values and how this can work and showing openness to a decision. So that's fine. Like, I'm fine with the motion going forward as it is, but as long as we understand that we're not a complete bench of governors here right now, and there may be changes involved to who's here as well in the future. It's not just by-elections, but it may be the Hooaya general election or other First Nations having different elections too. So those kind of decisions can be sequenced in a way that allows for that flexibility in the future too, especially if First Nations want to be involved in the pool too. But I don't think there's a problem moving ahead this way. It's just, I'm not certain if it's the sequencing is right. Dr. Roth, go ahead.
Yeah, this isn't really about who will be voting. It's a matter of process. And it's, if you make a clear process at the beginning and people know what the process will be, they're more likely to engage and to be involved in it.
Yes, I agree. And I think the process is set out pretty specifically. The decisions are made at specific times within the bylaws and regs that are already established by the province. You can look them up. I mean, yeah, but go ahead.
No, what I mean is the decision between an assent voting referendum or an alternate approval process. They're both two processes, and we can choose either one on long-term borrowing. So this isn't really about who's at the table. It's about deciding the process.
Yes. And so the point at which we decide on the process is in the normal way of doing things, not until we have an understanding of what's even on offer, which I think was Director Cote's point. So like I said, I think it is out of sequence, but if this is just about messaging to citizens that our intent is this, but if the feds swoop in and say, we'll pay for 98% of it, then that's a different situation completely, right? So, I mean, part of this is more than that. And I think because we don't know exactly what the scenario is, it is kind of out of sequence. But if it's about communication, then that's fine. But it probably won't fetter future processes, given that there's an established way of doing this. That being said, the motion can move forward. Any further comments? Dr. Haggard?
Just one final comment. We don't even know at this point if we're going to move forward with a new pool for the community. So I just think it's a little bit too early. I'm not against the motion. I just think it's too early at this stage.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much the case. So we can move forward with the motion as it is. Dr. Minions, you had a comment? No? Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go about doing this. Are there any other comments? Okay, seeing none. Oh, please go ahead, Wendy.
Apologies, I may have missed who the seconder was.
Oh, it's Fred.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with that, if we could have all those in favor? Yeah. Raise your hands, please. All those in favor? All opposed?
Me.
Me being Director Coots? Okay.
Yes, Director Coots, I said nay.
Okay. Oh,
And Kirsten.
1, 2. Can the nays hold their hands up again, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Say again? It's defeated? Okay, motion is defeated. Okay. And, oh, yeah, and I did get you there, Dr. Johnson. Yep. Yes, it is a part of the minutes. Okay, with that in mind, Dr. Haggard? Yeah, yeah. Are there other items on the, okay, please go ahead.
Sure. I realize that the regional district doesn't get involved in economic development, but I was wondering if it'd be appropriate to write a letter of support to Western Forest Products and Huu-ay First Nations regarding the ongoing support of APD, not only trying to save some good family paying jobs, but also the impact it could have if it's a permanent closure on Catalyst and how that would affect them as well. So I'm not sure if it's appropriate for us to do that or not, or
Yeah, so I think I would write it just to Western Forest Products because I don't think Huu-ay has invested in APD specifically yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Great,
were
thank
looking at it at the time.
thank you.
Plus, it allows me to vote, which I'm supportive of, if that's okay. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Cote. Any further comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Okay, so I think that's that. Could we have a motion to receive the items for information? Thank you, Director Roth, seconded by Director Cote. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us into item 8. 8A is the request for decision regarding the airport project coordination resourcing. So I believe that's Jenny. Are you online or here? Online. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we took a report to the AVRA committee in January, talking about the need for some resourcing in order to achieve their strategic plan and vision that they started in 2021. We did a review. We took this also to the West Coast Committee. We looked at the Long Beach Airport as well, and we made a recommendation, which the committee and board has concurrently passed, to support the creation of an airport project coordinator. At the Long Beach, we're really focusing on long-term land use and development plan and a number of other lease issues and land use management items, and we're making some good progress there. That position actually is out and advertised. We then, just timing wise, ended up going to the AVRA committee to have a similar discussion because they've had quite a long list of initiatives that we simply don't have the staff time to work on. In that service, we also have some surplus money that came from the COVID funding for airports. And so the impact financially for AVRA is actually going to be nothing for us to basically dedicate 0.25 of that position. So this is only a 2-year term position that we've created at this time, and we feel that it will allow a lot of support to achieve some objectives. The committee strongly supported that, and it is at the board for review and approval now. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thank you. Dr. Boyko, please go ahead.
Yeah, hello. I have 2 questions. I went through all your objectives and initiatives. So there's one for an internet line that has cost of $70,000 and costs are increasing. Has anyone looked at any alternative technologies such as Starlink that we use in our remote locations here and cost a fraction, like less than $3,000, and provides great internet in the middle of nowhere in this area and works well? Second question, I don't see any objectives or actions to increase the marketing for the airport to attract new clients. Is that something that the actual airport board is looking at to help defray the cost for the taxpayers? So for example, going to trade shows, industry events. I haven't seen the AVRA advertise on any of those things. Thank you.
Through the chair. Excellent questions. The cost for internet was originally estimated to be significantly less. And as we've been working through this, the costs have gone up. And so that project is on hold at the moment for that reason. And again, in relation to not having enough staff time, we simply haven't been moving that project forward. But yes, alternate technologies would be the better solution at this point because an investment of $70,000 when you're weighing the cost and benefit is slim. The second question about marketing. So yes, some of the The strategic plan and vision report for the airport talked a lot about that. And our next step is really to look at expansion to create more lease lots. That's one of our limiting factors right now because we don't have a lot of lease lots available. So that is our next sort of step, is create lease lots. Once we have those, then we would start looking at promoting those to fill those up. Again, we have limited staff resources allocated to the service, but once we do have more staff time, we would then focus on things like that. One of the things that was successful last year is even just starting to communicate at all about the airport. And so they did do the airport day and sort of like a grand opening once to celebrate the extension of the airport. But that service, yeah, it could use more staff time to make sure that we could actually move some initiatives forward. So excellent comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Director Cote, go ahead.
Thank you. So this is asking for 0.25 of full-time position. But then further in the report, it talks about estimating up to 0.5. So could you clarify on that, please? Thanks.
Through the chair. When we looked at the amount of time required, we think it's probably 0.25 to 0.5 that's needed because we're looking to find some synergies and balance the needs between both airports, because we do have a benefit in having more than one airport service. So with that, we think the scope of what the work that's needed is between 0.25 and 0.5 of a person. For now, what we're suggesting is that we use 0.25 of the approved airport project coordinator, and then we will supplement that with administrative assistant and other resource support to hopefully fill that up. But as a financial implication for this service, we're only looking at 0.25, which is approximately $22,000 for moving forward for the first year. So we'll see if that actually meets our needs. I hope that clarifies.
Thank you. So is this a new person then? And will we be sharing with the West Coast?
Yes, it's a new person, 2-year term, and yes, it will be shared with the West Coast.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, the Director Cote, go ahead.
Okay, I will make a recommendation to the board that the Alberni Valley Regional Airport Advisory Committee recommend that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors approve a 0.25 full-time employee staff allocation for the AVRA Airport Project Coordination and include in the draft 2023 to 2027 financial plan.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Haggard. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to the next item, which is still Jenny, pumper truck replacement. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we went to the Salmon Beach Committee to get support to come to the board for purchase of a new pumper truck. The existing pumper truck is at the end of its useful life. We've reviewed it in our asset management plan. Maintenance costs are going up. It has been on the books for replacement in 2023, and the committee has supported that we proceed. We have a budget value of $231,000, and we are recommending that we delegate authority to make that purchase through the RFQ, request for quotation process, as long as the dollar value is within our approved budget. We do not have full reserves for this, so we will do MFA borrowing, and we have had that on the books as well, so that we know that we will have to finance it. So borrow money to pay for it. But it will reduce our overall maintenance costs over time. We have thought that it's possible that we might not be able to do this considering the market and the issues we've run into, but we would like to try to proceed to see if we can purchase a truck and get one in place. It may be delayed for delivery, which we've seen with other vehicles. But once we sort of go through the process for RFQ, we'll know, and we might need to come back to the board if things change, but we're hopeful that it will proceed.
Thank you. So I'd note that the motion is 2 paragraphs, but it's only one motion. Dr. Haggard?
I'd like to move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors exempt the purchase
of a new pumper truck for the Salmon Beach Sewer Service from the ACRD's purchasing policy request for proposal process. And further, that the ACRD Board of Directors authorize staff to undertake a request for a quotation process for this purchase and delegate authority to the Chief Administrative Officer to authorize the purchase, provided it's equal to or less than $231,000.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Steer. Comments? Director Boyko, go ahead.
You mentioned, thank you through the chair. You mentioned that the Yuki Remnant Center charges $300 per pump out. How many pump outs actually take place in Salmon Beach?
Through the chair, we have our own pumper truck. So it goes around and it will do pumps, like it will pump out the septic system and then go to the community septic field and deposit the material there. The truck will do, I think, up to 10 a week. And so people call in, they get on the list and we pump those out. If the truck is down and out for maintenance, then we will call the Yuki Rented Center to come in and fill in for that. Then they will go and do those pumps that are on our list, but they can only do so many at a time because the community septic system has a capacity. So we can only, and then we would call them to come again. So the rate that they've quoted us is $300 per pump out, which is significantly higher than if we're doing it ourselves.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. All right, the next agenda item is item C. It's provincial restart funds reallocation. Terry, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So although we're going to start talking about the 2023 financial plan tomorrow, I just need us to circle back on the 2022 here for a moment. So we've had the provincial restart funds for the last couple of years to allocate towards COVID-related costs. And a couple of the projects that we had allocated for 2022 just have not quite worked out the way we thought they would. So there was West Coast Emergency Coordination, some funding allocated towards that project. And the areas have determined to do more of an informal sharing of information approach at this time. So that funding is not needed to look towards a feasibility study of a proposed service. So asking that be redirected to other emergency planning costs. And then the other one was we had some money through regional planning that we then got grant funding for that project instead. So just looking for that to be redirected to the park management plan that was developed for Maplehurst Park. So actually requiring a amendment of the bylaw from last year's financial plan to complete these moves. And that should be a wrap on 2022.
Great. Any further comments or questions? If not, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 separate motions for the update. Director Cote, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a question about last year, or was the Sproat Lake Lakeshore Trail part of this funding?
No, the Sprout Lake, the construction of the trail was done by another COVID-related grant, but not the provincial restart grants. This is actually for, not very often we get these, but they're actually a grant that can't be used for infrastructure. They had to be operating related expenses only.
Thank you. I'll make a motion then that the Alberni Claycott Regional District Directors give first reading to bylaw cited as bylaw F1155 2002 to 2026 Alberni Claycott Regional Financial Plan Amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you, Director Haggard. Any further comments? We can just refer to it as second and third reading from now on. Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Thank you.
I'll move second reading.
Thank you, Director Cote. Seconded by. Thank you, Director Haggard. Further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried.
I'll move third reading.
Thank you, Director Cote. Thank you, Director Haggard. Okay, any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried.
Look around. I'll move adoption.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Haggard. So moved and seconded. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item D, which is Emergency Support Services Program Guide for the 2022 update and a response letter to Minister Ma. Oh, yeah, that's yours. Okay. Heather, please go ahead.
Thank you. So the report in front of you is related to the Provincial Emergency Support Services Guide that was released in December. Just as a reminder, ESS is a service that we deliver to provide short-term support to residents who've been evacuated from their homes due to emergency. So we can provide food, clothing, and shelter for 72 hours. We run this program with the support of approximately 20 volunteers who are also supported by emergency program staff. So one of the issues that I have with how the province has rolled out with the ESS guide is that they did it without any consultation with local authorities. I take issue with this approach as it doesn't align with the spirit of cooperation between local government and the province. We are the folks delivering the program on the ground, and any changes to this program should be best implemented by having local governments provide some input into those changes. And the second concern that I have is the emphasis on the ESS guide on being able to support vulnerable populations. As I mentioned before, the program is delivered by volunteers, but they're not trained to provide support to the vulnerable population. The majority of our ESS responses in the Alberta Valley have supported the vulnerable population, and we really rely on local agencies in the community to support us, and that's Canadian Mental Health Association, CUIS, Salvation Army, Bread of Life, and the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. We need those agencies to help support these responses and help provide additional support to these folks. So I believe it's a bit of an unrealistic expectation for local authorities to take on a broader expanse of our program and to expect volunteers to provide those services. So I've drafted a letter that's in your agenda, and it's the recommendation today is for the board to support sending a letter to the Minister of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, expressing our concerns and requesting consultation on the ESS guide.
Thank you for that. Any further comments or questions? Dr. Steer, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. I really appreciate it and fully support the recommendation. The only thing that I would add is if we could CC maybe our MLA as well. I think that might be important on this one. And also, if we don't get the anticipated maybe further discussion with the minister, that maybe it might be something that the ACRG board might look at bringing up at possibly as a UBCM resolution that could come to the table.
Thank you for that. I think there may be MLAs who are part of a poverty reduction task group. We may want to CC them as well as Sheila Malcolmson's office as well, because it seems like it covers those two things. Go ahead, Daniel.
I'll just add one area, because I think if we were to backtrack 20 or 30 years and look at our volunteer fire departments, which are also subject to discussion starting tomorrow with budget, is that as the province gradually ups the ante, on volunteers, it starts with training, and we'll gladly probably access grant funding for training to provide the volunteers. But it's good to pay attention to the fact that as we work with vulnerable populations, as we up the ante, there's training, and then there's critical incident debriefing, and then there's greater administration and greater coordination with other agencies, which may not be required by law yet, but I'm pretty certain as mental health is recognized as a real health issue, it will be. And then there's privacy concerns that will pile on. So if we were to cast out 10, 20 years from today or less, my fear is that we end up inheriting really staff positions and greater costs that today exist with the province. So this is, it's an important service. I am completely supportive of the fact that local governments are better at local delivery, for sure. My concern is a subtle offloading of cost to local governments, including us.
Subtle. Okay. Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very supportive of this. Just like to point out that at ABICC convention on Friday afternoon, we have a session on emergency management, a plenary session to discuss regional district downloads as part of that discussion. And this is definitely falling in under that category. So hopefully you'll all be attending and take in that session. Thank you.
Well said. When it comes to poverty, mental health, addictions, all the things that create vulnerable populations, short of it's not a local government thing because people have freedom of movement, and as a result, like mental health knows no bounds. It's not something that is necessarily something that we can treat and be effective at, let alone talking about the fact that volunteers are fewer and farther between. And when they are, they have fewer and fewer hours available, less time, because they're too busy trying to make ends meet. In the past, people seem to have more free time as a result of, I think, more prosperous eras. But nowadays, we're looking at things that used to be done by volunteers will likely be done by people who need to be paid, not just because there are going to be requirements by the province to quote unquote do it right, but also because we need people to actually do it. And if we don't have people who have the time or feel like they have the time to give back, then A, that's a failure of society, but B, it's also something that is going to be saddled on local governments when it should be shared equally across the province at the very least. So this is something that we need to be very unified on. I think we need to be aware of that. I think Minister Ma has the right thing at heart, but the activist nature of her governance has been disruptive in this file specifically. So I'd like to see some more engagement back and forth with local government, given the understanding of how this all fits together. I think should be underlined. That being said, I think we need someone to move the motion. Is that correct? Yeah.
I'll make the motion that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors send a letter to Minister Ma of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, identifying concerns that the ACRG has with the Provincial Emergency Support Services Program Guide, and copy the letter to EMCRC ESS program.
Thank you, Director Cote, Director Ross. Any further comments? Go ahead. Microphone.
Usually I just do the mute unmute thing. Would it be necessary within the resolution to include our other CCs that we had identified?
It would be. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's do a quick friendly amendment then to include those.
Sure. We'll include
Okay.
our MLA, and I believe you had one other addition.
Yeah, I think there's still a working group on poverty reduction, as well as Minister Malcolmson. I don't know their names, and if they exist, that would be good. But if they don't anymore, that's fine. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. I'll move it. Okay. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, since we amended the motion, we have to do the motion again. All those in favor of the main motion? It's just the amended one now. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Declare the motion carried. Thank you. Okay. With that brings us to the next item, which is item E. It's a Banfield Community School Emergency Use Agreement between the ACRD and SD70. Heather, please go ahead.
Thank you. So the report in front of you is related to an agreement drafted between the Regional District and School District 70 to allow the Banfield Community School to be utilized for the storage of some emergency supplies, to be used for training opportunities, and to be used as a reception center in an emergency. At the moment, the community of Banfield has limited options for storing emergency supplies and for public spaces to be used as a reception center. Therefore, we've asked the school district to support these uses. These uses are actually already occurring, so the agreement just formalizes this arrangement with the school district. I just want to acknowledge that the school district's been very supportive, so thanks to them. And the recommendation for the board to consider is to enter into this agreement.
Any further comments, Director Cote?
Thank you. Just wondering if we need agreements, or do we have agreements with other facilities that we're using as emergency supply holds?
We haven't entered into formal agreements with reception centers. The reason we're doing this is because it could have an impact on the delivery of education. So we wanted to be very intentional about this agreement.
Sort of to have it in place just in the event that it's considered in future planning processes or coordination. Okay, Director Schmidt, please go ahead.
Yes, through the chair, for the purpose of full disclosure, I just want to mention that although not in this capacity, here in this capacity, I'm the emergency program coordinator for Bamfield. This really just formalizes an informal relationship that's existed well beyond my arrival in Bamfield. Is very positive for the community. Also want to mention I've had the pleasure of working with Heather, and she's been very cooperative in trying to get our program up and running again.
Always good to hear that. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Okay, Bob, would you like to move the motion?
Yes, I'll make the motion that the Alberta Claycott Regional District of Directors enter into the Bamfield Community School Emergency Use Agreement with School District Number 70 to authorize use of the Bamfield Community School for emergency-related purposes, associated training, and storage of emergency supplies.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Steer. All those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Thank you. Heather, I think you're next up for the next item. Just go ahead.
Thank you. So the Long Beach Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan is in your agenda and was developed using FireSmart grant funding. So the wildfire plan was previously prepared for the Alberni Valley and Bamfield, but Long Beach was never done. So this plan completes wildfire planning for the ACRD. So these plans are required to access further grant funding through the FireSmart program. The plan identifies wildfire risks and recommendations to mitigate these risks and is mainly centered around the populated areas in the Long Beach electoral area. We've taken some of these recommendations in the plan, and we have included them in our 2023 FireSmart grant application, which was just submitted in January. So we're hopeful that we will receive funding to carry out these recommendations. We hope to carry out FireSmart home assessments. So that would involve our FireSmart coordinator going out to residential properties in Long Beach and doing FireSmart assessments on residential properties. We've also applied for funding to do a rebate program, which would allow homeowners, once they carry out their FireSmart recommendations, they can receive up to a $1,000 rebate. And then we've also applied for funding to complete mitigation work on the Millstream water tower and pump house, which is extremely overgrown at the moment. So the recommendation in front of you is to adopt the Long Beach Wildfire Resiliency Plan.
Thank you. Dr. Siga, did you want to move this?
Sorry, yeah, I had some questions. There's nothing in there about addressing the lack of water for fire suppression in the areas of Port Albion or Long Beach. And it seems to me that that should be more clearly addressed.
It is touched on in the report. However, that's a bigger discussion with probably our regional fire services manager and with the District of Ucluelet to see if water lines can be installed and water protection can be provided to that area. It's a bit outside the scope of this plan.
Okay, through the chair, is it possible to look into alternative means of holding water. Like we've got lots of rain. It just seems that there must be alternative solutions to installing water pipes. I'm not sure. I can see Mike wanting to say no, but yeah, I would just really like to see just sort of more emphasis on the importance of addressing those two sort of lack of water issues within this. But I recognize that this is a separate discussion. So thank you for your information.
Maybe we can have a report on this at a future meeting. Yeah.
Through the chair, it certainly is something that we can report out on. It's an area that's been actively discussed, I think, within the organization. I certainly know that with my regular meetings with my counterparts, Dwayne in particular, for Ucluelet, we do talk about fire services and infrastructure, and there's certainly a lot to be discussed there. And I think whatever we would do would likely be in partnership in some way, shape, or form. The lowest cost alternatives, to my knowledge, outside of the formal report here, is really some infrastructure that a tanker truck can plug into when it comes to doing fire suppression. And of course, that would require that a tanker truck or pumper truck be available, which there isn't. And so, and it's not something that Ucluelet would necessarily purchase for our sake. So it would have to be something that's developed through partnership or agreement, and we'd have to weigh that option against the option of permanent infrastructure and talk about carrying costs over the years. So it is deserving of a report, likely not a short one, and one that would probably be co-drafted with Ucluelet because they would be our primary potential partner on this.
Dr. Steer.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just wondering then, maybe I'll reserve comments for a more fulsome report then, or could this be an appropriate time to make comment? Okay.
And make comments today, and then we'll know.
Okay. Yeah, I just thank you, Heather. Appreciate the report. This was a phenomenal report. My son works for the BC Wildfire Service, so I was acutely interested in this report. And the one thing within there, a few things were touched on, but in the report, there was a recommendation around the ACRD looking to hire a fire smart coordinator locally within the communities and build that partnership regionally with the district of Ucluelet was identified. But I would also, I think it would be important to reach out to the district of Tofino as well as Tloquet First Nation, Ucluelet thought as well, to have them included in those, especially with that urban interface conversation that's been going on around there. And I think it would be important to have them included within those conversations. Thank you.
I can actually add that discussion to our February 24th meeting. So we have a West Coast CAO and Executive Director meeting being hosted by Ucluelet. So I'll add that to the agenda, and hopefully that helps advance what would be a separate report to this one. Like Heather said, some of this falls outside of this one, so yeah.
Great. So on the main topic of the wildfire resiliency plan, do we have Dr. Siga, are you willing to move the motion for the wildfire resiliency plan, knowing that we'll have a report and recommendations potentially ready for the other item that you're talking about?
Certainly, thank you. I move that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors adopt the Electoral Area C Long Beach Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Steer. Further comment? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Okay. Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item 9, planning matters. So this is for electoral area directors only. I think they're all are, although municipal members and First Nation members do count for quorum, so please don't despair. Next item is 9.1A. You still count as being here if you go to the bathroom, so don't worry about that. Yeah. 9.1A, Mr. Erg, please go ahead with a rezoning application.
Yes, thank you. So we're just going to deal with, we had 2 public hearings for 3 applications. They were all at Beaver Creek. So Director Roth's now a pro at running public hearings. So the first application was a public hearing for bylaw P 1449 and was held on January 30th on Zoom and in the ACRD office regarding a property at 7881 Beaver Creek Road. In addition to staff and the applicants, there were two members of the public in attendance. There were no letters of public correspondence received ahead of the hearing or during the hearing. There was one question for clarification from a member of the public. And just to summarize what the application was for, the proposed rezoning is for a portion of a 7.7 acre property that has split zoning of A1 and R2 residential on it. And the proposal is to go to portion of the property to acreage residential RA2 district in order to accommodate a 2-lot subdivision. The area to be rezoned is 1.4 acre portion lying outside the agricultural land reserve on the south side of the property adjacent to Beaver Creek Road. And staff recommend that the board of directors receive the public hearing report and minutes and proceed with second and third reading. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Director Roth?
Okay, that the board of directors received the public hearing report, that the board of directors.
Oh, we
Oh,
do
we have
one
to
at
do
a
each
one at
time?
a time. Yeah, there's
Okay.
no ands in between.
That.
Yeah, we have to do it this way legally.
Okay, maybe I'll start over.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, that the board of directors received the public hearing report.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Schmidt. Comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried.
That the board of directors received the public hearing minutes.
Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried.
That bylaw P 1449, Regional District of Alberni Clearquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a second time.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried.
That bylaw P 1449, Regional District of Alberni Clearquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a third time.
Seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. You're just first in the sight line. So. Okay, any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Oh, Director Tucci, I think it's just for electoral area directors, so don't worry. Yeah. Next item is item B, the rezoning application. I'll be great, just like you said. Please go ahead, Mike.
Yes, thank you. So I did just to summarize, this public hearing was held for two separate properties and for two separate rezoning applications. One of the properties was at 6134 Wadena Road, and the other one was at 622 Fern Road. And just to summarize the procedure, when we do separate applications in one public hearing is the process will be to receive the public hearing minutes and the public hearing report for the entire public hearing, and then deal with the bylaw readings separately under each one. And so a public hearing was held on January 31st. I would note that no members of the public were in attendance. Staff, Director Roth, and the applicants were there. And again, there was no additional or no correspondence received prior to or at the public hearing. So the bylaw P 1452 relates to a 2.2 acre parcel, 2.25 acre parcel property located at 6134 Wadena Road. The applicants intend to rezone the property from small holdings A1 district to acreage residential RA3 district in order to accommodate a 2-lot subdivision that would create a vacant 0.6 acre lot. And I do want to note, and I noted in the public hearing, that based on the minimum density under RA3, there is the potential for up to 3 lots. That's not the applicant's intention, but it's important to note that. And again, for bylaw P 1451, this relates to a 1.9 acre property located at 622 Fern Road. The applicants again, intend to rezone the property from small holdings A1 to acreage residential RA3 district in order to accommodate a 2-lot subdivision. And again, I want to note that the proposed RA3 zoning with its 0.6 acre minimum parcel size could allow for potentially up to 3 lots. Again, not the applicant's intention, but the zoning would allow for that. Planning staff recommend that the board receive the public hearing report and minutes and proceed with second and third reading of bylaws P 1451 and P 1452. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Dr. Ross, please go ahead.
Okay. That the Board of Directors received the public hearing report.
Thank you. Go ahead, seconder. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sika. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried.
That the Board of Directors received the public hearing minutes.
Second. Thank you, Dr. Sika. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried.
That bylaw P1451, Regional District of Alberni-Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment Bylaw be read a second time.
Thank you. Seconded by Dr. Siga. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you.
That bylaw P1451, Regional District of Alberni-Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment Bylaw be read a third time.
Thank you. Comments? Seconded by Dr. Siga. Thank you. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you.
Should I move to C?
I think you've done that.
No,
No,
now I need to do the bylaw first.
yes, we would go.
Oh, yeah,
to
because you
the
spoke to
next
both
step.
of them. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
That bylaw P1452, Regional District of Alberni-Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment Bylaw be read a second time.
Do we have a second? Thank you, Dr. Boyko. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. I'm assuming since you're moving it that you're voting for it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't it work that way?
I think it does. I just feel like I need to say it out loud as chair. Yeah. Okay. Oh, there's only 2 motions.
And that bylaw P1452, Regional District of Alberni-Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment Bylaw be read a third time.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. Further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Alrighty, that brings us to item 10, which is reports, of which there are none. No unfinished business, no late business. That brings us to question period 13. Do we have any email? I forgot to mention the email addresses at the beginning. I apologize to those few of you who will be watching this in the future. Do we have any?
Mr. Chair, we have no emails to responses@acrd.bc.ca and no attendees online. We do have one in the audience.
Yes. Any questions, Mike? No? Okay. All right. Any further comments? Seeing none, we'll go into, now we're going to recess the meeting to go into the Regional Hospital District meeting chaired by Dr. Deb Haggard. Can I have a motion to do so? Thank you, Director Cote. Seconded by anyone? Thank you, Director Roth. All those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. We are in recess. Please go ahead, Deb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to call the Hospital District Board of Directors meeting to order. Firstly, I'd like to recognize we're conducting this meeting on the unceded territories of the Shuswap First Nations, and we do have directors calling in from other First Nations. And I'd like to show our acknowledgement and respect and gratitude for those nations as well. And just a notice to attendees and delegates that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the Regional District website. So we have an agenda in front of us. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda? And all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. We have minutes from the Board of Directors meeting, January 11th, 2023. Would somebody like to move the adoption of minutes?
Second.
Any discussion, errors, or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried.
So no delegations, no correspondence, no request for decision on bylaws. So now we're on to reports. Director Beckett is away. Director Schmidt, did you have anything that you wanted to report on?
Nothing to report. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Alberni Quaquot Continuing Care Society. Director Sega, did you have a report for us today?
You need to use your microphone now, sorry.
Thank you for the reminder. Nothing to report.
Next is West Coast Native Healthcare Society. Director Cote, do you have a report today?
Thank you. We did a bit of strategic planning for the future. They have their 48 unit is full. So yep, and we have a waiting list of, I think, 38 people. So yes, so looking at possible expansion again. Yes, that they have, I don't think I wrote my notes down in this book, but well over 100 units on site. So we're populating, are having housing for the population. So it's wonderful to see that happen. People are thrilled with the new accommodation. Our old friends are meeting. They've been at different facilities and whatnot, and they're meeting there, and it's a very happy house, I have to say. We also had Island Health representation come and visit to talk about problems that are occurring for nursing and staffing that going into the future. So we'll see what's going to happen from there. And that's my report this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cote. That's fantastic that it's full, but it just shows what a need there is for that kind of housing in our community. Next on the agenda is Tofino General Hospital. Director Steer, did you have a report today?
I did, thank you, Chair. Just a few of the physical things going on. There's a bunch of drainage work going on as we speak. So those pipes are being laid in the ground, and the paving should be happening in the springtime. There was a ATCO trailer that was on site that was used for primarily for COVID testing. That has been removed and replaced by a much smaller trailer, which is supporting some of the specialists that come up to Tofino. It's a very, very small trailer. It has no running water, but it does have electricity, Wi-Fi, and an assessment bed in it. So it is being utilized by many of the practitioners that come up. At this point in time, it is operational. And it just to point out one of the things that I've discussed here before in terms of long-term care at Tofino General Hospital. At any given time, there's up to 50% of our beds that are taken up in that long-term care. Right now, it's about 30% that are being taken up, and it is an ongoing issue. And hearing and knowing some of the work that's being done here in Port Alberni, that very much supports that issue that we have up in on the West Coast. And then the last little capital part, the redesign of the admin area, and there was also a design for a safer room within the hospital, and that has been approved and should be going ahead anytime soon, I'm told. So I suspect maybe later on in the spring that will commence, and that is it.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
What do you mean by safer room?
Yes, in the context of sometimes coming in, some of the challenges that can confront some of the hospital staff that comes in, there would be a more secure facility or area for that to take place.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Alberni Quaquot Health Network. Director Cote.
Thank you. Apologies. You should have had the minutes from the last meeting in your agenda. I'll make sure that it's in the next one, so you'll have two sets of minutes. We have new members for the table of partners, and just looking at opportunities that we can share network information going forward. So there is something UBCM sent out today, a grant for First Nations to work within urban areas. I think it's local government. So there's a grant there that's available. And I passed it along to the Health Network. So hopefully we'll get something out of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cote. Next, West Coast General Hospital, and I'll give you a short update on the emergency room renovations. Lights have been installed. Handrails should be delivered either this week or next week. The triage desk windows in the waiting room are to be installed next week as well. Fire alarms have been tested, and the prime consultant is in the process of doing a site review and making it efficiency less. So going around and looking at all those little things that still have to be completed and making a checklist, and they can go through and finish up those little things. So definitely getting closer to the end now. Is there any other reports? Seeing none. Could I get a motion that the Regional Hospital Board of Directors receive reports A through G?
Take that motion.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. No unfinished business, no late business. Any questions?
No, Madam Chair.
Great. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move adjournment.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you so much.
Alrighty, that brings us to the regular meeting once more. And now we have item 16, which is to go in camera. We have two reasons to go in camera today. First of which is, I'll just read out the motion because it lists them. It's a motion to close the meeting to the public as per the community charter under sections 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the regional district, or another position appointed by the regional district. And J, which should probably be 91J of the community charter and 21(1)A of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And that would be the reasons. So I will move that. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Steer. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried.